Save our badgers!
Thank you very much. Well, it's me, and thank you. It's wonderful to see the Badger Army here in Shrewsbury. Thank you.
Stop the Cull!
What an amazing campaign this is turning into. This is the middle of February. It's bloody freezing. We've got rain and floods, and we're still out in our hundreds, coming from all over the country. That caring, compassionate society that scares the hell out of Owen Patterson, the National Farmers Union. Why are we here? Because we're sick to the back teeth of this crazy, cruel badger cult. It makes no sense on economic grounds. It makes no sense on scientific grounds. And there's no justification in terms of animal welfare. This is the worst environment farm policy that I've ever seen in the last 40 years. And I think most people now across this country realise how bad, cruel and stupid it is. And I'm pleased to say most MPs, including many Tory MPs that I speak to, are beginning to wise up to how crazy and stupid this policy is as well. Now, over Christmas, I worked quite hard with many other people trying to get to grips with the cost of this tragedy. The one thing your friend Owen Patterson didn't want anyone to know is how much blooming money we'd spent on this crazy Cull. He'd done everything he could to hide the police costs, did everything he could to hide the administrative costs, did everything he could to hide the level of government trap teams that were used on this Cull. But down to people like you that made freedom of information requests, down to MPs that asked questions, down to leaked documents from civil servants that are sick to the back teeth of this policy, that were giving me and other people documents that really told us the truth. We created a real picture of what went on here. And when you saw those headlines in the Daily Mail, Daily Express, having £7.3 million was spent on those two Culls in Gloucestershire and Somerset, they're figures that we worked on that are pretty damn accurate, that the BBC and everyone else supports. In fact, what we found is they're probably quite conservative. You're probably looking around £10 million was spent on that Cull. That's over £5,000 a badger to kill those animals for no justifiable reason at all. And then we looked into how many of them had actually been free shot. Because remember, this whole culling policy was to test free shooting of badgers. It wasn't to test the badgers for disease. None of them were tested. It wasn't really to test humaneness. But what we did find that only 24% of the badgers that were shot in Gloucestershire and Somerset in those 6 weeks were by free shooting. Every other badger was via trap teams that were employed at your expense, civil servants to go in and kill those badgers when they could just have easily and more cheaply been vaccinated. That's an absolute disgrace on this country and on this government. And let's remember, while Mr. Patterson had all these civil servants running around, while all the police forces of both Avon, Somerset and Gloucestershire and many other counties were trying to go into the cull zones and stop people trying to protect our wildlife from being killed, they weren't looking at other things. The one thing they weren't looking at was flooding in this country. Mr. Patterson was cutting staff out of the Environment Agency. He was cutting money for flood protection. He wasn't bothered about the threats of floods in Somerset and other counties. And when the floods broke out over Christmas, where was he? He was on a skiing holiday in France. The deputy editor of The Sun rang me, saying, "We've seen Owen," and the Prime Minister had to go out and take the wrath and anger of the public because of these floods. This man is incompetent, he's lazy, and he should not be the Secretary of State for the Environment. There is no justification. But people power matters.
Yes.
You know, the farmers always said to me when we started this campaign, I remember standing in Northampton with 15 people in late August around just trying to say how we could start a campaign town to town. Now we get thousands of people up and down the country because we built something here. The farmers always said to me, people don't care about badgers.
Yes,
they don't care about our wildlife. They just want cheap milk. They want cheap meat. Leave us alone. We'll just get on and do it. You know what? They've got a nasty shot. We do care. We will come out and we will fight and we will put a real value on this wildlife. You don't just kill it because it's cheap to produce milk or sell it to the Chinese or export your meat products. We care for it, we look after it, and we will find a better way. Now, Brian May and others who've worked really hard, me included and other welfare campaigners, have worked on options for vaccinating badgers. We know we can do it. We know there are thousands of people like you that will volunteer to help vaccination teams to go out into the field, who can work with vets and other specialised people to do this. We know that we can move cattle vaccination forward as well. And what Brian and other charities did last week in Parliament was launch a new badger and cattle vaccination programme, which is the way forward, which the retailers should get behind, which the government should get behind, which the farmers and landowners should get behind, because culling of badgers is never ever going to work. It's never going to be publicly acceptable. You're not going to deal with the disease. You're probably going to make it worse. We can be certain there has been perturbation in Gloucester and Somerset because you went against the own advice of Natural England to extend those culls. We know that you're not going to be able to do this humanely. We've heard already that many of those animals were trapped in inhuman conditions of real cold, damp and horrible conditions overnight to be shot the next day. Yet in Wales, they were vaccinating. They spent only £1.2 million vaccinating over 1,100 badgers, while Mr. Patterson and his mates killed 2,000 for £7.3 million. And let's just talk about the National Farmers Union for a moment, because we're going to be in Birmingham on the eve of their conference, when they're going to elect their next president. Now, they've got a tough choice to make. They might elect Morag Raymond, who's a dairy farmer. They might elect Adam Quinney, another dairy farmer, as leader. But each of those individuals has to look in the mirror and think long and hard about the reputation of that organisation and farmers in general. They have two options in front of them. They can go against public opinion, scientific opinion, animal welfare expertise and veterinary expertise, and continue to cull badgers in a huge waste of money that is no longer acceptable to a vast majority of people. Or they can find another way. They can reach out and work with people like me and others in wildlife charities up and down the country, the Wildlife Trust, the RSPCA, the Badger Trust, Care for the Wild, numerous organisations that will sit down and work with them to help them get on top of this disease. I'm sick of the lies about the reducing bovine TB. Over the last 12 months, as a result of tightening up biosecurity, cattle control movements and TB testing, we have seen almost a 10% reduction in the number of cattle slaughtered for TB in this country. Yet the National Farmers Union is briefing councillors at the moment around this country saying it's gone up by 10%, which is a complete lie. That is not the truth, and that's what's happening all the time. We also find that all the data the Animal Health Veterinary Laboratory has been using over the last 3 years to tell us how many new incidents there are of TB and HERT in this country, surprise, surprise, is completely wrong. It's not fit for purpose, to the point where the computer system has errors in terms of entries from information going in, the data coming out. They've stopped producing it, they're having to review it, and what we think we will find is they've overestimated the number of new incidents of TB by about 30% over that 3-year period. So not only have you butchered badgers at a huge cost, you've done it against what's actually probably been a declining trend in TB in our herds. And it's that information that Owen Paterson has taken to MPs to prove that this was the policy he should have. When we sat in Parliament recently with Anne Main, the MP for St Albans, who will be speaking out against this cull on the 1st of March in that town, she said we've been misled. He came and told us that this was a rising problem in herds, that we had no alternative but to kill these badgers. We have plenty of alternatives but to kill badgers. And what's changed is we're beginning to ask some serious questions in this country about how government works. Yes, the Environment Agency's a mess. That's why parts of this country are flooded, and that should not happen. But also Natural England's a mess. That's why you extended this badger cull and started killing these animals for no scientific justification whatsoever. Our government is not working for the people any longer, and we've got to make change. And all politicians and all parties have to understand that animal welfare and wildlife protection matters to people. You know, I've worked for months and months behind the scenes with government ministers in this government like William Hague to try and protect elephants, and we have a major summit in London next week, which is the first of its kind, bringing world leaders from all over the world together, including the US Secretary of State and probably Hillary Clinton and many other leading figures, to deal with Africa's tragedy about losing its rhinos and its elephants and the wildlife threat. And I feel very proud to be able to say that I played a small part in making that happen alongside many other dedicated people. But isn't it wrong that we bring world leaders to Britain to try and prevent what's a desperate situation of wildlife around the world when we're quite happily killing it in our own backyard? That makes no sense whatsoever. Now, I was looking forward to bringing that up with Mr. Patterson next week when I go to the World Leaders Reception at the Natural History Museum, but as some of you will be following on Twitter and Facebook, unfortunately he's rather have his eye surgery, I think, than me. So we probably still won't have to actually have that conversation. But it is coming. We are going to keep fighting this, Cull. We're fighting it in council chambers across the country. There are over 100 petitions now to stop culling on council land. So please, sign those petitions, support them, and get hold of your councillors ahead of the May elections coming up. You have leverage there. We have a second debate in Parliament on the 27th of February with another vote. And I can tell you, talking to Tory MPs and the chief whips and others, they have had enough of culling. That's from the Tory party. They want this policy dead and buried. Because they realise this is political poison for anyone who touches it. Now remember, this was never about science, this was all about politics. In 2008 and 2009, David Cameron made a decision. He was not going to accept the findings of the randomised badger cull. He was not going to accept the findings of the best bit of peer research that we've ever seen done looking at bovine TB and badgers. He was going to go down the route of culling badgers for political reasons. He wanted the National Farmers Union support. He wanted the Countryside Alliance support. He wanted the Countryside and Landowners Association support. And in 2010, that probably helped him in some seats. But it's not going to help him now, because 4 or 5 years on, the tide has turned. People can see it for what it is. It's a wanton and merciless destruction of our wildlife that not just shames us here in this country, but I think shames us around the world as well. But what we've seen across this country is the best of civic society, the best of people coming together, those who go into the fields like Drew and others who will give their time, those who are councillors and working at local government level, those that are lobbying their MPs, those that are coming to marches like this up and down the country, those that contact me in their hundreds, writing letters to local papers, getting local community groups together to try and stop this terrible policy. That's something that I feel really proud of in this country. It's what makes Britain great. It's what makes us special in the world. That's why organisations like the RSPCA started here, Compassion in World Farming and WWF, and charities like Born Free and Care for the Wild, because people care. And that's why world leaders are coming together next week in Britain, because it's charities like that that got them here. So we might be able to save the future of Africa's elephants and rhinos, but we better damn well be able to save the future of our badgers as well. No more culling! We will find alternatives. Now the pressure is on the Labour Party to get off the fence and say we'll not ever cull badgers again. The pressure is on the Liberal Democrats to admit they got it wrong. If they ever want to come back into government with the Labour Party, they've got to stop supporting this crazy culling policy as well. And if the Tories want to go down fighting with it, damn well let them go down. There are some good Tory MPs that won't go down with it, and I really do appreciate the people like Zach Goldsmith and Anne Main and others that are out there pushing that argument, but there's not enough of them. And we need to see those that supported this cull accept that they got it wrong. And the farming unions need to accept that we all support farmers. We have to in this country. At this time, many are struggling, particularly in the floods. But we will not give them a free pass to kill our wildlife. We will not give them a free pass to destroy something that's lived in our landscapes for the best part of 500,000 years. Remember, there's lots of talk of badger numbers. Many people exaggerate them. We had some results come out of some survey data a few weeks ago. I will tell you now, the best we could hope for is we've probably got 500,000 of these animals in this country. Okay? And if we go ahead with this cull and continue to expand it as Owen Patterson would like to do with the National Farmers Union, we will take out tens of thousands of those animals. At the same time, we lose 50,000 on the roads. At the same time, when we have a floods like we're seeing in Somerset at the moment, the poor animals die in large numbers as well. Never mind problems that they might have with food and disease that will occur in their life cycle. So let's be clear about this. There's no justification for removing or killing those animals. We must protect them. We must deal with bovine TB, but we should do it in what is a compassionate and caring way for our wildlife. I do not want to see farms in this country producing cheap milk and meat for me to eat in the supermarket when all the wildlife around those farms has been destroyed as a consequence. That's no good for anyone. And one of the things we will do into this year is we will get to those supermarkets. For too long, they've sat on the fence. They take our money. They allow us to go through the doors and give us all those great products, but they do not take responsibility for the mess they've created.
Shut them down!
13 million cattle movements in this country a year is too much. We need to sort out quick and speedy vaccination of cattle to sell that meat only into the UK supply chain and not try and export it into Europe and other countries. The retailers can do that. The Tesco's, Sainsbury's and Asda's can make that change, and we will force them to do it. And we will get to the bottom of this problem. We will help farmers reduce this disease, but we will do it in a caring and compassionate way that protects the future of both our farmers and our wildlife. Please keep doing what you're doing. We're going to be in Birmingham in a few weeks' time. We're in St Albans and Stratford-upon-Avon, and we move into other towns and cities across this country. As long as this crazy cull goes on, you can be certain in towns and cities across this country, you will see thousands of the best, decent, compassionate people coming out to make their voices heard. This man's days are numbered. The National Farmers Union has suffered a serious blow to their reputation, and they will have to change, or they will reduce their influence and pay a heavy cost. And we will all be a better society as a result of what you're seeing here and across this country. Makes me proud to see you all here today. Please do one other thing I can ask you. Support the Badger Trust. Support charities like Care for the Wild. Support your local wildlife trusts. Make that commitment of time, money and volunteer effort, because if you continue to do that, wildlife in this country becomes a powerful force. The public behind it, we can protect it and we can make change. And Mr. Patterson will never be able to get away with this type of thing again. Thank you very much.